Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the deadliest wars in human history. We're going to talk about conflicts so devastating, so epoch-making that they left scars on the human psyche that haven't healed to this day. We'll explore the causes, key players and outcomes of each conflict along with their staggering death tolls. Buckle up because we're going on a journey through the absolute darkest chapters of human history. Let's get started. There's a reason they called it the Second World War. It engulfed the entire planet in flames. From North Africa to the Eastern Front, from the Pacific to Europe, humanity was in a death struggle. Over 70 million souls perished. Think about that. 70 million. The numbers are almost too big to grasp. Behind each number was a human being. The Nazis sought to dominate Europe and exterminate populations. The Japanese cut a bloody swathe through Asia. The Allies fought back with determination. The world hung in the balance. Imagine China in the mid-19th century, a land already reeling from famine and political instability. Now picture a charismatic figure, Hong Xiuquan, convinced he's the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He's not just some fringe preacher, he's building an army, a movement. He calls it the Taiping, Heavenly Kingdom, and his sights are set on toppling the Qing dynasty. Millions flocked to his banner, fueled by desperation and the promise of a better world. What followed was one of the most brutal civil wars in history. The Taiping Rebellion wasn't just about political power, it was a clash of ideologies, a social upheaval that shook China to its core. Cities were turned into battlegrounds, entire provinces were devastated. By the time the dust settled, an estimated 20 to 30 million people were dead, victims of war, famine and disease. The Qing dynasty, though victorious, was left a shadow of its former self. China would never be the same. They called it the war to end all wars, but the irony is bitter indeed. World War I, a conflict so horrific, so senseless that it still boggles the mind. Picture this. Millions of men crammed into trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles, caught in a nightmarish stalemate. Machine guns mowed down soldiers by the thousands. Poison gas choked the air, and artillery barrages turned the landscape into a muddy hellscape. This wasn't just a war, it was an industrial meat grinder. The old world order, the empires that had stood for centuries, crumbled into dust. The Treaty of Versailles, meant to bring peace, only sowed the seeds for future conflict. World War I was a tragedy on an unprecedented scale, a stark reminder of the human capacity for self-destruction. It's a story that needs to be told and retold so that we never ever forget the lessons learned in the trenches. Imagine a nation torn apart not by foreign invaders, but by its own people. That was China in the 20th century. On one side, the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, clinging to power. On the other, the communists, led by Mao Zedong, promising a new era. The Chinese Civil War wasn't just a battle for territory, it was a clash of ideologies, a fight for the very soul of China. From the countryside to the cities, the two sides clashed in a brutal conflict that dragged on for decades. Millions perished, not just soldiers but civilians caught in the crossfire. In the end, the communists emerged victorious, establishing the People's Republic of China. But the scars of that conflict, the divisions it created, continued to shape China to this day. Napoleon Bonaparte. The name alone conjures up images of battlefield glory, of empires won and lost. He was a military genius, a charismatic leader who rose from humble beginnings to conquer most of Europe. But his ambition knew no bounds, and his conquests came at a terrible cost. For over a decade, Europe was engulfed in the Napoleonic Wars, a series of conflicts that pitted France against a constantly shifting alliance of European powers. Millions perished on battlefields across the continent, from the scorching sands of Egypt to the snow-covered fields of Russia. In the end, Napoleon's empire crumbled, defeated not just by armies but by the forces of nationalism and his own hubris. The Napoleonic Wars may have ended with his defeat at Waterloo, but their impact on Europe, on the very idea of warfare itself, was profound and lasting. We often think of World War II as the deadliest conflict of the 20th century, but a war raged in the heart of Africa that claimed millions of lives. This wasn't just some regional conflict, this was Africa's World War. The Second Congo War, a tangled web of alliances and betrayals, drew in 9 African nations and countless armed groups. It was a conflict fueled by greed, ethnic tensions, and the legacy of colonialism. The fighting was brutal, often fought hand-to-hand in dense jungles and across ravaged landscapes. But the true horror lay in the war's impact on civilians. Millions were displaced from their homes, forced to flee for their lives. Rape was used as a weapon of the war, and children were forced to become soldiers. The death toll? Estimates range from 5 to 10 million. Most from disease and starvation. The Second Congo War was a humanitarian catastrophe, a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. Chapter 7, Red versus White, the Russian Civil War. Imagine Russia in chaos after the Bolshevik Revolution. The Tsar is gone and a new struggle for power begins. The Red Army fights for communism. The White Army opposes them. A brutal conflict ensues. Brother against brother, unimaginable suffering. From Siberia to Moscow, a bloody struggle. Foreign powers intervene. Millions perish from war, famine, and disease. The Bolsheviks win, but at a terrible cost. The war shapes Russia for decades. Chapter 8. The Forgotten War, the Korean War. Often overshadowed by World War II and Vietnam, the Korean War was a conflict that shaped the Cold War and continues to cast a long shadow over the Korean peninsula. In 1950, North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. The United States, determined to contain the spread of communism, intervened, leading a UN coalition in defense of South Korea. What followed was a brutal 3-year conflict that pitted brother against brother, ideology against ideology. The fighting was fierce, marked by large-scale battles and devastating air raids. Millions perished, including countless civilians caught in the crossfire. The war ended in 1953 with an armistice, but no peace treaty was ever signed. Korea remains divided to this day, a stark reminder of the human cost of the Cold War. The Vietnam War, a conflict that tore a nation apart, divided a generation, and left an indelible mark on the American psyche. It was a war fought in the jungles and rice paddies of Vietnam, a guerrilla war against an elusive enemy. The United States, drawn into the conflict to prevent the spread of communism, found itself bogged down in a quagmire. The Viet Cong, masters of guerrilla warfare, fought with tenacity and determination. The war escalated, with the United States unleashing its full military might. But despite superior firepower, the United States was unable to achieve a decisive victory. The Vietnam War was a tragedy for all involved, a conflict that claimed millions of lives and left a legacy of pain and division. Chapter 10, A War of Attrition, the Iran-Iraq War. In the annals of warfare, the Iran-Iraq War stands as a grim testament to the futility of conflict. For 8 long years, from 1980 to 1988, these two Middle Eastern nations were locked in a brutal war of attrition. Fueled by territorial disputes, religious differences, and political ambitions, the conflict quickly escalated into a bloody stalemate. The fighting was characterized by trench warfare, reminiscent of World War I, with both sides resorting to chemical weapons in their desperation for victory. The war exacted a horrific toll on both nations, with millions dead and wounded. The economies of both countries were devastated, and the social fabric of both societies was torn apart. The Iran-Iraq War serves as a stark reminder of the enduring consequences of conflict, long after the guns have fallen silent. Outro lest we forget remembering the fallen. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, follow and share for more historical content. The wars we've discussed today are just a glimpse into the long and bloody history of human conflict. Each conflict, no matter how distant in time or place, holds valuable lessons about the human condition. Let us know in the comments which war you found most intriguing and why. See you next time.